The order paper is a motion on relationships and sexuality education. I'll ask the clerk to read the motion.
That this Assembly recognises the value of compulsory, standardised, inclusive, high-quality, evidence-based and age-appropriate relationships and sexuality education as a means of empowering and preparing our children and young people for life. Regrets that children and young people in Northern Ireland have not had access to such a curriculum. Acknowledges that teachers and school staff must have the support, training and resources they require to feel confident in delivering relationships and sexuality education in schools. Further recognises that relationships and sexuality education has a vital role to play in tackling violence against women and girls, and calls on the Minister of Education to bring forward a plan which enshrines the right of children and young people to access relationships and sexuality education, and which values their voice in the development of a curriculum that will deliver a standardised, inclusive, high-quality, evidence-based and age-appropriate relationships and sexuality education.
Thank you. I call Kate Nicholl to move the motion. Thank you. The Business Committee has agreed to allow up to 1 hour and 30 minutes for this debate. The proposer of the motion will have 10 minutes to propose and 10 minutes to wind. As an amendment has been selected and published in the Marshall list, the Business Committee has agreed that 15 minutes be added to total time for the debate. Please open the debate on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am grateful to have the opportunity to open the debate on this motion, a debate which will no doubt spark some passionate views across the House, but one that I hope that we can conduct with the respect that is due. The first time we discussed anything to do with relationships and sexuality at my secondary school was in a biology class on reproduction. I was 15 years old and we all knew what was coming. The teacher very slowly retrieved the video from the store and regretfully slotted in a VHS and pressed play, and some psychedelic kind of sperm went across the screen, and we had to endure that a second time, and on both occasions a child fainted. And I remember thinking at that time this was not the relationship and sexuality education we needed or that we wanted. And having come from Zimbabwe, it struck me how vastly different my experience had been there. At my primary school, we were given access to age-appropriate education on healthy relationships, which given the prevalence of HIV and AIDS, was quite literally a life-saving policy decision. And then I arrived in Northern Ireland, and as a young person, the system, it just baffled me, and that's why we brought this motion to the House today. It is long past the time that we gave young people the right to access comprehensive RSE as a means of empowering and preparing our young people for the realities of life. And it's not just regretful that so many have missed out on this education, but as I will set out, I believe it is negligent. In 2018, the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women recommended that the UK government make, and I quote, age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights a compulsory component of curriculum for adolescents. The intervention from the Secretary of State while this place was down was an important step in the right direction, but there remains significant variation amongst schools in how RSE is taught, what content is covered, and when it is covered. The current guidance also allows for parents to exclude their children from crucial lessons on a range of subjects, including LGBTQ topics, sexual health, pregnancy prevention, and access to abortion, thereby diluting the education received by our young people. The reality is that RSE topics are interlinked, and limiting access to parts of the course leaves young people vulnerable to misinformation. An effective RSE curriculum, tailored to stages of development, should impartially teach age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate content. Far better for young people to be able to ask an adult, a trusted adult, their questions than have to seek the answers elsewhere, often on the internet. A study by the Belfast Youth Forum has found that 73% of young people said they only received RSE once or twice or rarely, and 60% of young people felt that the information they received was either not very useful or not useful at all. In their recent report on LLW, the Secondary Students' Union in Northern Ireland found that only 22.8% of young people surveyed felt that they had been adequately taught about consent. The opt-out provides for the potential dilution of children's rights by limiting their access to age-appropriate information about healthy relationships and sexuality, and we are opposed to such a measure on that basis. The rights of the child must always be the priority, and our children and young people want access to a comprehensive RSE. Yes?
So if I understand this motion correctly, it wants to remove any reference to parental rights, any reference to respecting the ethos of a school, any right to governors having a say in this matter. If I've misunderstood the motion, no doubt she will correct me. But in doing that, aren't you flying in the face of the very European Convention on Human Rights, where in Protocol 1, Article 2, on education, it says the state shall respect the right of parents to ensure such education and teaching in conformity with their own religious and philosophical convictions. Why are you trying to defy the appropriate human rights?
The member will note that the 2023 statement on the Committee on the Rights of the Child on Article 5 of the UN CRC sets out that parents' responsibilities, rights and duties to guide their children is not absolute, but rather delimited by children's status as right holders. So there can be no dilution of the children's rights. And I would just suggest to the member, it's not really up for me to to defend this. You know, he needs to defend why he is not supporting this when the Children's Commission, Nikki, and I'm setting it out. I'm just saying the member is not qualified to really give an opinion on this when all the evidence and all the experts say that this is what is needed. And it is not just about forming healthy and safe relationships and understanding consent and understanding abuse and being able to identify when you're being abused and know how to seek support, but it's also about online safety, and I would hope that every member in this House cares about that. It is important that parents are equipped and confident, but it should not infringe upon the rights of the child to access this education. And you know, since becoming a parent, ending child abuse is something that I have become more and more invested in. And as a parent and as a legislator, I want to make sure that we are all doing our best to ensure that no child is subject to abuse. We don't know how many children in the UK and Ireland are being abused because it's mostly hidden from view and it's underreported. Adults may not recognize when their children are being abused. A child may not know or understand. They may be ashamed, too scared to tell anyone. Children need to understand what abuse looks like so that they can get help. And without fact-based RSE, they could be missing out on crucial information. For our children and young people, knowledge is power. And I've been so inspired by an amazing woman called Hayley Ashton Lamont, who waived her anonymity to speak out about the abuse, the sexual abuse she received as a child from the age of 8 to 18. And she was robbed of her childhood. And she had to fight the system for justice. And Hayley shouldn't have had to go through any of this. And I wonder how many people in our society are living in silence who have been harmed because they have not had the space to have safe and healthy discussions about relationships. She herself said that school kids grow up into adults. And she said, we have to accept what was done to us with our adult logic is almost more painful than the abuse that was masked as love and care. Kids should grow up into adults with an understanding of RSE and the capacity to flourish and thrive, not to have to heal from the past. And so much harm has been caused by not preparing our young people, and it doesn't have to be that way. We can do something about it. And very much connected to this is the issue of online safety. We have to recognize the world that we live in. According to Ofcom, almost 2/3 of 13-year-olds in the UK have at least one social media account. According to NSPCC research conducted before lockdown, 1 in 7 children aged between 11 and 18 has been asked to send sexually explicit images and messages. That is abhorrent. And one key part of tackling this horrendous situation is to ensure that all children have access to standardised RSE curriculum that equips them to understand what healthy relationships look like and to recognise the signs of unhealthy relationships. There is so much in terms of violence against women and girls, which my colleague Connie Egan will touch on. There's the whole school approach. But I want to give space to the words of two young people who are doing work experience in my office today. Cadence and Samira said, "As young people, we feel the lack of proper RSE curriculum has greatly affected our ability to make informed decisions in compromising situations. The absence of a reliable RSE has inevitably led to damaging consequences. The topic should be discussed freely to allow students and young people to express their own dilemmas without the stigma. RSE conversations should not feel taboo. We are entitled to access comprehensive and holistic education on relationships and sexual education, instead of haphazardly scouring through the internet and expose ourselves to dangerous content." With the internet and social media, our children are accessing more harmful content and information than ever before, and according to the NSPCC, are more likely to come across sexual images and videos at a younger age than their parents would ever have done. Our children will be accessing information about relationships and sexuality. There is no doubt about it. The question for us here today is how we believe this education should be delivered. At worst, some saying that we should leave it to the internet with misinformation, fake news, and damaging, misogynistic, and dangerous information, setting the agenda, or at best, retain the current postcode lottery with the quality of RSE depending on what school you attend. Or do we acknowledge the reality of our world and work to ensure that every child in Northern Ireland has access to inclusive, high-quality, evidence-based and age-appropriate relationships and sexuality education from trusted and safe adults that will empower us and prepare them for the realities of life? And I just want to finish by saying that to anyone who has been let down by our education system, to anyone who has had to live in silence with what was inflicted on them, I am so sorry, and we are going to fight for a relationship and sexuality education which is befitting of the 21st century. Thank you.
I call Cara Hunter to propose the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And today I write. Oh, moved. Is it? Yeah.
I call Cara Hunter.
Apologies. Today I rise to propose our amendment to this motion today, and while small, our amendment focuses on teaching consent, educating on coercive control and highlighting the importance of nurturing positive relationships. Firstly, I would like to thank the Children's Law Centre for their incredible work on RSE and the work that they do for all of our children in Northern Ireland. It is utterly invaluable, and we as policymakers are extremely grateful for the work that they do and the expert insight into policy areas such as the one that we are debating here today. Our amendment demands change and focuses on the important aspects of child safeguarding, prevention of violence against women and girls, and education on fostering healthy relationships. Our society undeniably has a deep-rooted problem with misogyny and violence against women and girls. We believe in the SDLP that education as a tool of early intervention will focus on respect, consent, and creating positive, healthy relationships, and that this will contribute to tackling our societal problem of violence against women and girls that exists not only in reality but also, sadly, online. A report published in September 2023 by the Executive Office demonstrated that over 97% of women surveyed for a report stated that they have experienced violence and abuse in their lifetime. There are some seriously distressing figures from the report of Ending Violence Against Women and Girls, Experiences and Attitudes of 16-year-olds across Northern Ireland, which was published last year, and I will read some of the statistics there, which I find to be particularly concerning. When respondents were asked if violence against women and girls is common in Northern Ireland, 51% said yes. When asked, most people who have been dating for a while would find it hard to say no if their partner asked them to have sex. Only 1 in 5 disagreed. When asked, when someone is sexually assaulted when drunk or on drugs, are they partially responsible for what happens? And 12% said yes, they agreed, which I find deeply disturbing and distressing. It is impossible to hear these statistics and not be deeply worried about what the future holds for women and girls and all people across Northern Ireland. And these are responses from our young people. I think it's paramount that they are educated on this area. To tackle the issue of violence against women and girls, we must start at the start. And I welcome that the Education Committee will soon be doing a micro-inquiry into RSE so we can bring up topics just like this. Key topics like education on consent can help educate our young people to recognise boundaries and really grasp what sexual harassment and assault looks like, and most importantly, who to talk to and how to report it. Age-appropriate RSE can help our young people feel empowered and educate them on the importance of fostering a culture that emphasises the importance of sexual consent and consent in general. This includes promoting open communication, respect for boundaries, and a very important point is understanding the role of bystanders in preventing non-consensual situations. In the absence of this crucial, fundamental education, young people, as the previous speaker had noted, will learn online, and that's not what we want. Over the years, I have had the genuine joy as an MLA chatting with a multitude of young people about education, about the challenges that they face, particularly in our changing world, and their thoughts on our current education curriculum. SSUNI are a powerful team of young people who are using their voice to talk about all aspects of their academic life, and they are just fantastic. And I've mentioned it a number of times at the Education Committee. They have a document called Let Us Learn, which they launched in Queen's last year, which touches on the evident and undeniable inadequacy of the current relationship education and some of the hypothetical ways that we could weave it into the current curriculum as they feel necessary. It's really important that young people have a say in shaping their curriculum, and I think we should listen to them wherever possible. For me, RSE is essentially about teaching our young people that no means no, but it's also okay to say no when you feel uncomfortable. And I find it fantastic that our young people are speaking up on this issue and telling the very people who create the curriculum it is not fit for purpose, it doesn't help them identify abuse in their own relationships and identify coercive control or educate them on who to talk to about abuse if that's what they are experiencing. And what does this mean? This means a lack of education leaves a multitude of generations of young people who have gone without. And last year I met with the Feminist Society in Queen's, who had talked about the important role that even our university campuses and what they can play in ensuring that young students receive consent education as well. By the time you enter university, the likelihood is that you may have already had a sexual experience. So this education coming at a university level is coming a little too late for so many. I feel it needs to happen in secondary schools. An important study released years previous about Northern Ireland campuses showcased that 1 in 5 people had experienced sexual harassment in their first week at university. So I think while we're talking today about RSE and our secondary education, it's also important to note the role that our universities can and should play. Moving to a really important aspect of our amendment today is the point of coercive control. And what does coercive control actually look like? It can be isolating you from your family and friends, denying you freedom and autonomy, gaslighting you, limiting access to your finance, limiting your aspirations, turning children against you, controlling decisions you make on your body, making jealous accusations, regulating you and your life, and lastly, threatening your family or pets. Now, if you're a teenager aged 13, 14, 15, 16, you don't have the understanding or the lived experience to recognise these things as abuse. So that's just one of the many reasons RSE is so fundamentally crucial to a child's well-being and ultimately preventing harm and abuse. This amendment and this type of education is not about sexualising children, it is fundamentally about protecting them. And to conclude, one of the fundamental arguments against RSE in schools is the argument of let children be children, and I agree. Let us let children be children. Let's protect them by educating them that they have a right to say no, to know what abuse looks like, what it sounds like, both inside and outside of the home, be able to identify what inappropriate touch looks like, who to talk to if it happens, and focusing on protecting our children from harm online as well. If children are raised in homes where there is domestic violence, where there is sexual abuse, that is their normal. We need early intervention to teach them it isn't normal, and again, where they can find support. Abuse thrives in silence. By talking about these issues, it has nowhere to hide. I believe parents should be kept informed, kept aware about these issues and what their children are being taught. We must take away the taboo, recognising teaching consent is a child safeguarding tool. And whether it is a child experiencing sexual abuse as a minor or a teenager experiencing coercive control in a teenage relationship, the only way for young people to know their rights and protect their bodies is through RSE, which is age appropriate. We speak strongly in this House on a cross-party basis about the argument of we all play a role in tackling violence against women and girls. Therefore, I would urge members to see the undeniable link of age-appropriate RSE education in teaching consent and recognising the role that this will undeniably play in tackling violence against women and girls in our society. Thank you.
Call Patsy in.
Sinn Féin fully supports the need for a relationships and Sexuality Education curriculum that is compulsory, that is age appropriate, that is fact-based, and that is delivered consistently across all schools. If we're serious about issues such as child safeguarding, supporting young people to have happy and healthy relationships, consent, and tackling violence against women and girls, then giving our children access to proper RSE in our schools is vitally important. I had a meeting earlier on with Bernardo's, and one of the issues that came up in that meeting was the subject of young people sending and receiving sexually explicit photographs online, and young people in their naivety not understanding the implications of such action. And there are well-known cases where young people have taken their own lives after being blackmailed that their photographs were going to be posted up online. And one other young lad said he thought if he had come forward that the police would have become involved. So, first of all, RSE is to provide information to young people about the dangers of such activities. And secondly, if through naivety or for whatever reason they do get involved, then they're given help about where to go to for assistance in situations like this so that they can be helped. I've sat on the Education Committee here for a number of years now, and one thing that has come up time and time again is the inconsistency of provision and often lack of provision of RSE in schools. Young people themselves have told us this. Many are telling us they go through their entire educational journey without receiving education on this topic. And while it's important to commend those schools who do deliver high quality RSE to their pupils, the issue here is consistency. While I understand the need for a degree of autonomy for schools in delivering other aspects of the curriculum, that autonomy, in my view, should not extend to RSE. Many schools are not grasping this as an issue. Some are being led by external influences, and this is not serving the needs of our children and young people. Teachers need to be empowered, they need the proper training, and they need the proper resources in order to be able to do this effectively. New legislation is welcome, but does it do what's required in terms of the actual delivery? I'm not so sure that it does. This is a topic which needs to be underpinned by fact in its teaching to young people and delivered in a consistent manner across all schools. There can be no equivocation in that regard. The need for it to be compulsory as part of the curriculum is clear. It's a child protection issue in my view, and according to the NSPCC, and I quote, all school-aged children and young people should receive whole school, comprehensive and inclusive RSE across all years. RSE can play a vital role in the safeguarding of children and young people. A whole school, comprehensive and inclusive approach to RSE has the potential to prevent harm to children. By supporting children to recognise abuse, know how and where they can ask for help, understand consent and healthy relationships, and by enabling more adults to identify concerning behaviour and know what to do if a disclosure is made. It is organisations like this that are the experts, and they should be listened to. I've been clear in previous debates around education that the child should be central when it comes to policy development. I've also said countless times that we need to be led by the evidence, and that is why I'm supportive of relationships and sexuality education in our schools that is compulsory, that is age appropriate, that is fact-based, and that is delivered consistently across the system. I support the motion.
David Brooks.
And I first declare an interest that my wife is a governor in Grosvenor Grammar School. Throughout the debate around RSE, the DUP have been steadfast in defending parents as best placed to determine what is in the interest of their child and arguing that the ethos and values of our schools should be respected. And it is on that basis that we are opposing the motion. The teaching of RSE is nothing new. There were requirements for schools to deliver RSE well before the introduction of the Education Minimum Content Order in 2007, and it is mandatory that all pupils of compulsory school age, despite what is implied by this motion. The idea that it is right and important for pupils to receive high-quality, age-appropriate RSE is not in dispute. Indeed, it is recognised as a key element in preparing our children and young people for life. The statutory curriculum for personal development and mutual understanding at primary level and personal development strand of learning for life and work at post-primary prescribes the high-level minimum content for RSE at each key stage. And grant-aided schools are required to have an RSE policy that is based on consultation and co-design with parents and pupils. Whilst governors and the principal have statutory responsibility to deliver the minimum curriculum content, they also rightly have autonomy over when, how and who is involved in curriculum delivery, aligned with the ethos of the school. This is the approach we take for providing education in Northern Ireland, not just RSE policy. The undermining of the role of schools and boards of governors in shaping policy, which this motion calls for, alongside arguing for the removal of parental consent, would be regressive. The state has never been a good parent, and in my opinion, no thank you, going to make progress, and clearly in the opinion of many who responded to the consultation on RSE, that it is dangerous and immoral for it to insist upon disregarding the views and beliefs of parents in this area. If the family unit, recognising and including the diversity of family types we have in the modern Northern Ireland, is recognised as the optimal means by which a child is raised, cared for, taught as they progress towards adulthood, if we trust parents with the shelter and health and nutrition and care for their child, why would we insist in this particular area that they cannot be trusted? I argue this point recognising there are many parents out there with views and values that will differ from my own, raising children ingrained with values that differ from my own. There will be parents from a range of faith backgrounds and none. There will be conservative and liberal parents. Some will endeavour to pass on their values to the next generation, and others will minimise that influence, allowing a child to cut its own path. It is the right of the parent to decide on that course. Indeed, as we've heard, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child acknowledges the right and responsibility of parents to bring up their children. Few in this chamber have questioned the judgment, morality or influence of either parents or school governors in general. So I ask why then refuse to trust them in this specific field? It is notable there is not a single reference to parents, parental rights, responsibility or opt-outs within the Alliance Party motion. Perhaps that is because, Mr. Speaker, the Alliance Party direction on this is directly at odds with 91% of respondents to the RSE consultation that agreed that parents should be informed about the nature and content of the RSE curriculum, the 61% of respondents who believed that parental rights should take precedence. Over 13,000 responses were received by the close of the consultation. Over 10,000 have signed the petition. The emails, the phone calls MLA offices have received on this issue since the debate was put on the public agenda highlights the concern of the Northern Irish public to protect these parental rights. Thankfully, the recently published regulations and guidance from the Department provide more robust protections than those in England, allowing an absolute right to parental opt-out up to year 11 and also beyond that if the child does not object. This must remain. However, it seems for Alliance this does not strip back the parents' rights nearly far enough. It seems to me that the proposers of this motion wish to harness the power of this House and the levers of the state to which they have access to impose their own ethics as mandatory for all, while seeking to design a system designed to exclude the views they do not share. We in the DUP believe that parents must be at the heart of this discussion. There must be a clear statutory duty on schools to share teaching materials in advance, and those materials should be the product of co-design with parents who are best placed to determine what is in the best interest of their child. There is a genuine feeling of anger and fear amongst parents who feel that the Alliance Party wishes to diminish their rights and will seek to legislate in a matter where teachers will be forced to teach materials which collide with their conscience. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Emma Sheeran.
King Corlia, I raise to endorse this motion and amendment, and I want to thank the proposers of both for bringing it. I think that this is a really good conversation to be having, and I sort of welcome the opportunity to discuss this again, because I believe, as I have said before in this chamber, that any opportunity that we take to talk about this issue in broad terms is to break down the stigma and is to help in solving the problem of unhealthy relationships, domestic violence, gender-based violence in its entirety. So I thank you all for that. We have, since this place came back up at the beginning of February, seen all parties saying that ending violence against women and girls is a priority, and indeed I think all members have stated that very clearly. And we all know that violence against women and girls, domestic violence, is at epidemic level in the north of Ireland. We have all attended the vigils, we've all sent thoughts and prayers, we've all stood with families who have been grieving a mother, a daughter, a sister, a niece at the hands of some violent individual who did not respect women. And we know that the cause of violence against women and girls is sexism, and it's the most extreme level of that. And so if we're serious about ending violence against women and girls, we have to be serious in dealing with the subject, and we have to discuss it. And that means education, that means dialogue, that means talking about this, and that means giving our young people a better chance. Because if we don't implement standardised relationship and sex education across our schools, we are damning another generation to the same vigils, the same thoughts and prayers, the same hashtags, the same sorry stories on social media. And that's not something that I want to be a part of, because our young people deserve better. We have to give the next generation a better chance. And there are norms that there are societal norms that we all have to unlearn. Let's give our young people the chance to learn the proper norms, proper healthy relationships, what is right. I think there's a duty upon all of us to do that, and I think that this is something positive, and I hope to see this endorsed today. So I congratulate those who brought the motion in. I will indeed, thank you.
Would the member agree with me that parental voice is of course important and they should be included in the education and the forming of the curriculum, but ultimately this is about children, and children are sometimes learning about what a healthy and safe relationship looks like from parents who in some circumstances are in fact abusers, and that there are different types of education you can get depending on what school you're getting. So standardising it, making sure it's in schools is so important for the well-being of all children.
Thank the member for her intervention and agree with that, and think that all of us have opportunities to learn here, and all of us will have our own standardised thoughts challenged at times, and have opportunities to see things in a different light, and I think that's healthy and that's to be welcomed. No, thank you. I'm finished now. I just want to endorse the motion and that hope to see it passed today.
I call Johnny Buckley.
Over the past week, I've been contacted by many parents who have been shocked, alarmed, some disturbed by the Alliance Party's attempts to impose themselves on their children's upbringing. The recent Relationship and Sexuality Education consultation found from the thousands of responses that 73% of parents and those that responded disagree with changes to RSE. So it begs the question, in light of such a large disagreement with those proposals, why are the Alliance Party insisting on forcing this on children, parents and teachers? I'll make some progress first and I will come back to it, because I have a lot to say about the Alliance Party here. Do they know better than parents? The wording of today's motion is deliberately coded, members, because the Alliance Party know that to break down the code, the game is up. So let us attempt to decode some of the wording contained in the motion. Firstly, the word compulsory. This means it will be forced on every school against their will and ethos. It means that parents have no say in what their children are taught. It means the limitation of choice. With one word, members, Alliance transformed from a supposedly progressive liberal to regressive authoritarians. As a party that wears human rights as a badge of honour, and I see Mr Tennyson laughing, and we will have much to say about him in due course, this motion demonstrates that it is but just a show. Parents are downtrodden, school ethos is ignored, and rights are suppressed. Why is it so hard for the Alliance Party to understand? Let parents parent. Let teachers teach. Let governors govern. And most importantly, let kids be kids. The word standardised, meaning academic freedom is limited and school ethos is further restricted. Schools are on the front line and know best how to respond to pastoral needs and working in conjunction with parents. Schools offer a safe space for moral discussion to happen, recognising that every school is different and every child unique. The Alliance Party want conformity to their radical and extreme ideology. That is clearly how many of you may laugh, but that is how many of us view it in society today. Let me be clear. Schools are for education, not indoctrination. Schools are for information, not extremism. Then we have the word evidence-based, and they're very keen to put that on the agenda. What evidence? What about the evidence of thousands of parents who reject the Alliance Party's power grab? 73% who responded disagreed with the changes. This evidence shows that once more the Alliance Party are out of step with the public. What about the evidence contained within the CAS report? We've been very quiet on that. Highlighting huge concerns with approaches adopted by the Alliance Party and others. I would hope that the Minister may elaborate on this point in due course. Then we have the word age appropriate. Who decides what is age appropriate? Is it the state? The schools? Or, if some would have their way, is it the Alliance Party? Why don't the Alliance Party place their trust in the people who are best placed to handle these questions? The parents and schools. Do the proposers of this motion claim to know better than parents? I, for one, will not be telling them how to raise their kids. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, where do these proposed changes from Alliance Party end? I think we need to just stop and consider just how confusing and scary a place it is now for our young people growing up in today's society. Absolutely.
Will agree with me that many people from backgrounds, various different backgrounds, communities have raised genuine concerns about the issues that the Alliance Party have brought forward. Would the member agree with me that the Alliance Party's description of those people as far right is actually shameful and a demonisation of those who have genuine concerns?
I thank the member for his point, because there is radical ideologies, and the members might want to laugh at this and sideline it, that it's a point of extremism, and in fact, a point of the far right that has been mentioned. I have to say, I find that hugely insulting. And the member's getting up now, but to actually have the knack, to call parents, to call governors, to call teachers as far right, I find this offensive and would ask them to retract.
Point of order, Ms McAllister.
Is it appropriate for the member to not direct his comments through the chair? I mean, it is quite clear that he isn't, so maybe the member might actually be able to control himself.
Yes, well, look, this is the point. The Alliance Party are very, very keen to slur parents and politicians and governors and actual concerned citizens. It's reckless and dangerous in the extreme. But I can assure you this, the public will not be taken for fools. At a time when the education sector and parents are facing spiralling childcare costs, complex needs assessments and serious funding pressures, where are the Alliance Party's priorities? Gender ideologies, puberty blockers and attempts to strip away parental rights, not in my name, not in the name of this party.
Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Tom Elliott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And obviously, It's a healthy debate so far. I've heard the words healthy and unhealthy relationships, but certainly what we need to do is ensure that our young people and our children are educated for the future. And that does mean educating them in terms of relationships and sexuality education. That is important. But I do think there is a difference between providing that opportunity but overriding other rights and responsibilities. And that's the part that concerns me. I fully acknowledge the motion and the amendment as being what they believe as rightful. I believe, and personally, the motion goes too far in the sense of its compulsory rights. And I listened to the proposer of the motion. I'm just concerned about some of the wording, that there will be no dilution of children's rights. And I know from experience some of the issues around children's education in RSE and outside of that even. And it is healthy if it's age appropriate. It is healthy if it is in the right basis and the right terms, but some of it isn't. Some of it isn't age appropriate. And that is what concerns me. Sorry? Happy to give way.
I thank the member for giving way and for such a respectful turn. That's the point of standardisation, is to ensure that everyone is getting the same education and to make it age appropriate. Would the member agree with me that, for example, the NSPCC PANTS campaign, which is directed at very young children, is such an important safeguarding tool? It's age appropriate, and it's not just education, it's about safeguarding as well. And by standardising, we're making sure that everyone is getting the right level for their age group.
Members, an extra minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and believe me, I have some experience of that. Not all of it, and not all of that standardisation is appropriate for every young person or every pupil at school. And believe me, I know. That is the reality, that in some cases it isn't appropriate for some of those people to be learning, because it actually puts them in the opposite direction. And I've known situations whereby young people have shared inappropriate images, even though they have been getting the education, even though they have been attending courses. So we do need to make it appropriate, and I broadly accept that. So to me, I have concerns around it only being the children's rights. There are other people's rights in this as well, parents' rights. We also have the rights of other children. And just because one child has a right for one thing, that sometimes works against a child's right in another case as well. So we need to be extremely careful. Sorry, I'll give way. Yeah?
Would the member agree with me that also on the point of rights, we also have to consider the rights of teachers who are placed in some very difficult circumstances already as bid?
Yes, I totally accept the member's point, although whenever it gets into a curriculum, obviously teachers are in a different position, and they're in a difficult position that they broadly have to accept because it's part of the curriculum. But I do have to say that RSE must, on its basis, ensure that children understand the difference between sex and gender as well, because I have concerns that all of a sudden they may not be taught that difference. And that means there must be a clear definition of a woman and a definition of a man. Secondly, standardised must mean universal. Schools should adopt an RSE programme within the guidelines in consultation with pupils, teachers, boards of governors and parents. But compulsory means that our RSE must be delivered. But under Article 5 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the parent's authority to act in the best interests of their child in an age-appropriate manner. The question was asked earlier, who defines the age appropriateness? Because I can tell you from knowing young people, some children and some young people at the age of 12 have a different level of understanding and knowledge on how to take things forward than other young people at 12 years of age. So I have to say, in principle, yeah, I'm happy to give way.
you actually highlighted a very crucial age at a child's development is 12, when a majority of young people have either entered or entering puberty. And actually it's very important that they're all equipped, regardless of the levels of maturity, for example, regardless of whether they have special educational needs or special needs, that they're actually all equipped with the correct tools for safeguarding and for their own bodily autonomy as well.
Well, I'm sure the member would also accept, Mr. Speaker, that some of those people and young people at the age of 12 will take a different meaning and a different value out of that. So in other words, it's not always appropriate to have the same education to those, maybe young people with special needs, maybe others with different vulnerable aspects as well. Not to say in principle I support the issue around RSE, but I have concerns around this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Nick Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A wide range of treaties, expert reports and children's rights and safeguarding groups have set out the case for standardised, inclusive, high-quality, evidence-based and age-appropriate relationships and sexuality education. And from here on in, I'll just refer to that as high quality, as it's quite wordy. A whole school comprehensive approach to RSE has the potential to prevent harm to children by supporting children to recognise abuse, know how and where to ask for help, understand consent and healthy relationships, and also to enable adults to identify concerning behaviour and know what to do if a disclosure is made. And our current approach has been highlighted by some members to the preventative curriculum, provides schools with the flexibility to put in place a curriculum within the culture of the individual school. The ETI report on the preventative curriculum in schools highlights the downside to this flexibility and adaptability that is afforded by that non-statutory approach. Provision is at risk of becoming patchy, and the quality and the depth of the provision will vary depending on the school. And in my view, there are things that in terms of the welfare, well-being and safeguarding of our children that we need to be clear all children need to learn to be prepared for life. So as the motion states, RSE is a means of empowering and preparing our children and young people for life. We must equip them with evidence-based information to make informed choices about a whole range of topics and issues that they will encounter in their lives. And I don't believe this is something to be feared. We are simply equipping children and young people with information about how to keep themselves and others safe. Programmes should be able to respond to the needs of children as they mature so that they can make well-informed and responsible choices about their lives. And I want to be very clear that I don't think RSE, as has been suggested by some members, is actually about trying to change anybody's mind, trying to impose a value system on anybody. It is about providing pupils with facts, with information, and with a safe space to discuss these issues with their peers under the guidance of well-equipped and confident teachers. And there's been much reference made to the rights of parents. I want to be clear, I am a parent, I speak as a parent, and I care deeply about the education of my children and for making sure that they have access to this kind of information. I don't think that should be painted as somehow irresponsible or not paying proper regard to the welfare of children. But I don't think enough has been said about the views of young people. We do need to listen to young people in this space. It's not acceptable that young people are leaving school saying they in some cases didn't receive this type of curriculum at all, or that the curriculum they did receive was not fit for purpose and did not prepare them for life in the real world. The ETI report, as I've referenced before, into the preventative curriculum in schools, found that when they visited schools, and this has been highlighted, that teachers reported to them that they felt they lacked the knowledge, skills and confidence in delivering the curriculum in this space. And that's why I agree it is absolutely crucial. Teachers and school staff must have proper support, proper training and resources that they feel they need to be confident to deliver RSE in schools. And if the proper and appropriate curriculum was delivered, that would need to go hand in hand with the right support for teachers. And parents, of course, have a vital role in this. I don't think anybody is denying anything other than that. And best practice, as identified in that ETI report, characterised that as a whole school planning process that involves wide-ranging consultation with all of the stakeholders, including the parents, pupils and governors. So I would strongly argue that parents and carers should have access to the materials that are going to be used in RSE, and ideally with support materials provided along with that so that they can continue constructive and supportive conversations with their children at home. It's clear that RSE in schools is an issue where there are strongly held views across the spectrum. That's been very clear from the debate here today. As a parent and as someone who cares about the education of all children in Northern Ireland, it is my strong view that that high-quality RSE that we have referred to in our motion really is nothing to be feared. It is about keeping our children safe, it is about keeping our children healthy, and it is about preparing them for life in the world that actually reflects the world they live in, a life that is increasingly lived online, where they are exposed to great risk of harm, and to not prepare them for that is doing them a great disservice. Because I fear if we don't place responsibility for this work with our schools and with our teachers, we pass that responsibility on to others, and we pass that responsibility on to others in the online space who do not always have the best interests of our children and young people at heart. So a proper, high-quality, standardised RSE curriculum removes that risk and actually places our children in a safer and a better place.
Ann Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to make a few points in relation to the motion. I think that we all have to acknowledge that never before in our society have children been under such pressure and have such difficult choices to make. And therefore it is up to them, or up to us, to help to support them in every way that we can. And RSE is a tool that can be used, taught in a sensitive manner, encouraging children and young people to have self-respect, the ability to make safe, responsible, well-informed decisions so that they can form healthy, respectful relationships, both in their teenage years and into the future. They need to know, as the member for East Londonderry said, when they are being coerced, when to give consent, when it's appropriate to say no. I don't disagree with any of those sentiments. However, while RSE is a compulsory part of the curriculum, and we don't automatically get that from the motion before us, there is an obligation in our society and in our education system to deliver RSE in conjunction with the school principal, the Board of Governors and the parents within a school. And it is primarily because of the exclusion of parents that I am opposed to this motion. Schools have an ethos. I'm thankful that schools in our community, I have a lot to get through, schools in our community have a general broad Christian ethos and children are taught within those values. I think that is for the good of society and will stand them in good stead as they go forward. And I regret that this motion does not reference parents. And perhaps it is, Mr. Speaker, reflective of the upper band's contempt for parents, or the upper band representatives' contempt for parents, grandparents, teachers, pastors, ministers, who, when they gathered to discuss RSE in Portadown, the member for Upper Ban refers to it as a dog whistle to the far right. The member for Upper Ban should remember that 13,500 people responded to the recent consultation on RSE, and they certainly were not from the far right. And as other members have said, it is also really important to acknowledge that in that consultation document, many of those parents said that parents were best placed to discuss these issues with their children. And in fact, there is evidence that if parents discuss these issues with their children in a well-formed, loving home situation, then that is for the best outcome for the child. No, I'm not going to. And that, I think, and I believe that this motion does usurp the role of parents. It does usurp the role of teachers and the role of boards of governors to make that holistic view of their school, their ethos and what they're going to teach in relation to RSE. Can I also say as well that I do think that there is an element of this debate that pits children's rights against parents' rights. And much has been made of the rights of the child. And I was just looking through Article 2 of the European Convention on the Human Rights Protocol 1. Makes it clear, in relation to education and to teaching, the state shall respect the rights of parents to ensure such education and teaching is in conformity with their own religious and philosophical convictions. And indeed, this was reflected in the RSE legislation that was brought forward in England relatively recently. So we it appears to me that in this motion we are saying, do what I say, and that's all that you can do. So we need to respect the rights of parents. We need to respect the rights of teachers, because not all teachers will want to teach a standardised curriculum and will want to teach according to their own conscience. Can I say in closing, Mr. Speaker, that also the motion makes reference to supporting teachers in the delivery of RSE. And in November of last year, I wrote to the SIA and the Chief Executive because I was concerned at the number of references to organisations within the RSE hub, some of whom... Yes, I will.
Thank the member. The member would realise from her extensive research in this that some of the organisations connected are extremely concerning.
The member has an extra minute.
Thank you. They're not just extremely concerning. Some of the organisations listed within it were actually being assessed for criminality in relation to this. And I do think that we need to support teachers with broad, balanced information, and not information that only reflects one view of society. The member for Tyrone, I think it is, indicated that we should all learn from this, and of course we should, but perhaps she will also learn that describing puberty blockers as a health right for teenagers is also wrong, given the CAS report and the damage that has been done to children and young people by gender identity clinics.
Having taken all relevant factors into consideration, I have decided to apply a grace period of up to 15 minutes to accommodate the number of members wishing to speak. During this time, members called to speak will have up to 5 minutes, but will not be able to give any additional time for taking an intervention. I call Connie Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion and the amendment tabled by the SDLP. I thank them for bringing it. I would also like to associate myself with the remarks made by Ms Hunter that if we want to let kids be kids, the best thing we can do is stop them from being abused. My colleagues have already outlined the reasoning for bringing this motion to the House today, and I wanted to speak on the importance of RSE on preventing violence against women and girls, domestic and sexual abuse, and child abuse. The Executive recently produced a draft strategic framework for ending violence against women and girls. Outcome 2 of that is healthy, respectful relationships as a prevention to gender-based violence. Education is the most important factor in ensuring young people have the right knowledge and skills to have fulfilling and safe relationships throughout their lives. This strategy was co-designed by 50 partners, including educationalists, women's sector advocates, those working with victims and survivors of domestic abuse, the youth sector, and included the faith sector. They produced recommendations around the education of our children and young people, including working together with young people and the education sector to strengthen and mainstream education on strong and healthy relationships throughout the curriculum for all ages and learning needs, and further developing, in collaboration with young people, the design of relationship and sexuality education which is accessible, inclusive, age and developmentally appropriate. It is recognised across society and our community that high-quality, age-appropriate RSE is essential in tackling gender-based violence. We also see this in the Gillen Review into the law and procedures into serious sexual offences in Northern Ireland. Sir John Gillen could not be clearer when he stated it was his firm conviction that it is crucial that the RSE curriculum includes the areas in his review in serious sexual offences, and that it was not enough to leave boards of governors to pick up this point. He continued to say, the Department of Education has a duty to play a positive role in addressing the justice gap that exists in our approach to serious sexual offences. I strongly recommend that the Department of Education draw up a plan to exhort all schools to include these matters within their curriculum, and if that proves ineffective, to be the subject of legislation mandating such education. The words of Sir John Gillen. I would strongly urge the Minister of Education to take a more proactive approach than his predecessors in working with the Minister of Justice and implementing the recommendations in the Gillen Review that relate to our education sector. In the last fortnight, I have spoken to both Bernardo's and the NSPCC, both of whom, as leading children's organisations, are supportive of the approach in this motion on RSE. These organisations and others recognise that RSE plays a huge role in child safeguarding. The NSPCC specifically states that a comprehensive and inclusive approach to RSE has the potential to prevent harm to children by supporting them to recognise abuse, know how and where they can ask for help, and understanding consent and healthy relationships. They also highlight this will enable more adults to identify concerning behaviour and know what to do if a disclosure is made. Bernardo's emphasises the dangers that we see when young people do not receive high-quality RSE. Without guidance and information from a trusted adult, many children will find information elsewhere, for example, online, where information can be misleading or even dangerous. This is backed up by research done by the Belfast Youth Forum. It is a stark finding that the most common source of information on sex and relationships for young people was their friends. The second most common was social media. Only the third was lessons at school. We are failing our young people. Without access to a standardised, high-quality curriculum, they are turning to online sources and porn. Their peers' advice that is information that should be given by a trained and safeguarded adult in a position of trust. In the words of your colleagues, no thank you. Before I finish, I also want to point out that the Department of Education's own inspectorate in his department, the ETI, published a report in May 2023, which found that RSE in schools is not good enough, and that half schools in Northern Ireland teach little or nothing on sexual consent. The ETI are even telling us this is not good enough within the Minister's own department. In conclusion, RSE is a key tool to prevent gender-based violence and abuse, and a safeguarding measure for children and young people. I'd like to take this opportunity before I finish to thank all the organisations in Northern Ireland who are doing brilliant work on this. That includes Bernardo's, the Commissioner for Children and Young People, Northern Ireland Mental Health Champion, Informing Choices, Human Trafficking Charity, Invisible Traffic, Common Youth, White Ribbon NI, and Positive Life. There's many, many more. Young people in the SSU&I and the Northern Ireland Youth Forum are telling us that they need more on RSE. There's extensive evidence base from human rights, women's and children's organisations, and we're not actually asking for anything new. High quality RSE is delivered in schools here in Northern Ireland. Every young person should have access to that curriculum.
Colin McGrath.
And I'm sure, as it's known today, that this is a motion that doesn't have any legislative underpinning, and it will give an opportunity for us all to give our views, and it's very clear that we're getting those views today. And one of the things I suppose I would reflect on is that as one of the major outcomes of this is children's safety, I think it's really important maybe that we dial the rhetoric down a bit and that we have the conversations on that basis, that it is about protecting children and young people right across our society. Now, I, like many of the other members across the House, have had emails over the weekend from individuals who are rightly voicing their concerns about today's motion, and that's part of a democratic society, that people get to put their views forward. But at the outset, I would like to dispel some of the myths that have been generated as a result of some social media activity recently. And that is that healthy RSE is not about promoting abortion. It's not about transgenderism and whatever that is. And it's not about teaching primary school children about sexual pleasure. That is what it's not about. What is healthy RSE about? Well, I believe that it's about improved knowledge and attitudes. It's about improved communication skills and understanding of boundaries. It's about nurturing positive and healthy relationships. And not just for someone's future partner, but for all the relationships that a young person will have in their life. Education does not seek to simply instil knowledge or an ability to repeat facts, but it's to develop the whole person. Because education is just about that. It's about children asking questions of trained and trusted teacher, learning and growing as a person. If we seek to develop the whole person, then part of RSE must include teaching about consent, about education and coercive control, and about promoting positive relationships, and that's why we have our amendment that is presented today as well. For I believe that if we fail to do so, if we fail to ensure that our young people are equipped with this knowledge, understanding and skills, then where will they learn about it? Now, admittedly, some of the education within RSE may be difficult for parents to effectively communicate to their children. Ofsted told us 3 years ago that 90% of girls and 50% of boys said being sent explicit pictures or videos of things that they did not want to see happens a lot or sometimes to them or their peers. By the age of 13, 50% of children across the UK have seen or regularly view pornography. I'm going to just run that one because I found it a bit shocking, so I'm going to run it again. Because if we don't teach our children appropriate relationships and the healthy RSE, by age 13, 50% of children have seen or regularly view pornography. That is not a healthy way for children to learn about boundaries. That's not a healthy way to learn about communication or nurturing positive relationships. Other data indicates that children who receive comprehensive RSE engage in their first sexual experience later than those who receive no RSE or abstinence-only RSE and are less likely to take sexual health risks. Why? Because they are equipped with the skills and understanding to make those decisions. I recently met with the NSPCC just last week, and they shared with me their concerns that a lack of awareness of these matters covered in a healthy RSE programme is resulting in young people who actually do not realise when they are being abused, and this results in them not reporting that on. In reality, what we are saying is that if we don't teach healthy boundaries, then children will not know when those boundaries are being breached. And after 16 years of being a full-time youth worker and having some of the responsibility for child protection and well-being in my area, I could not rest easily if I thought that we could be putting young people at risk, at a safeguarding risk, by not implementing healthy RSE. Speaker, if we want children to have more knowledge and better attitudes, improved communication skills, and to understand boundaries, and to nurture positive and healthy relationships, then let's equip them with the skills to do so. So I would urge members to do the right thing for our young people and accept our amendment and to support the motion today.
Owen Tennyson.
Mr. Speaker, and I hadn't initially intended to speak on this motion, but given that I've proven popular amongst members of the DUP, I thought it would be remiss of me not to respond. I want to address a number of the points raised over the course of the debate, but in the first instance, I want to speak about some personal experience. And I always try to avoid speaking about personal experience, but I think it might add something for some members in this chamber. I was at school not that long ago, and more recently than most members in this place. And I have two poignant memories of relationships and sex education in school. So rare it was that I can actually remember those occasions. The first of which was an occasion whereby a religious facilitator was brought into the school to preach abstinence, to tell us that sex was for marriage and that was our only choice. Now, as a young LGBT person at school who at that stage couldn't get married, I knew that that facilitator wasn't speaking to me, that I was invisible, that that lesson, that education wasn't for me. They didn't deal with my kind there. That is not an experience that I think any young person should feel in 2024 in Northern Ireland. And yet, it remains a reality for too many of our young people. So I am proud to be a member of a party that is coming to this chamber against all of the bile and rhetoric from others to advocate change. Second occasion, we had a facilitator come in who did try, in fairness, to administer some level of fact-based RSE. And there was one fleeting reference to same-sex couples, which was met by laughter from teachers and pupils in the school. Can you imagine how that feels to be a young person struggling with internalised homophobia, scared to tell your parents and relatives and friends who you are, to have your sexuality laughed at in a public forum? That is not good enough, members. It is not good enough, and it is incumbent on all of us in this chamber to change it. A number of assertions have been made, and I've taken note of a few of them. I would say, first of all, that my experience was indoctrination. It was not education. I was not given all of the information I needed to be able to make an informed choice in line with my own ethical values. Someone else's ethical values were imposed upon me, and that continues with RSE being outsourced to religious organisations in schools today. We wouldn't stand for it if the science curriculum was outsourced and a religious organisation refused to teach the theory of evolution. So why do we accept an approach that isn't evidence-based in some of our schools on RSE? It's not good enough. We've heard lectures from Mr Brooks about the imposition of ethical values. I take great exception to that, given that the DUP of all parties is the party which has inserted itself in the lives of women in terms of their bodily autonomy and LGBT people in terms of their rights to marry for too many years, and they are in no position to lecture those of us on these benches about imposition of values or human rights or equality. This talk about evidence. I will take my evidence not from the DUP, who don't have a good record on that either, but from the NSPCC, the Children's Law Centre and the Children's Commissioner, who have safeguarding at their heart and who are experts in their field. And again, I make no apologies for that. We've heard about the balance of parental rights and children's rights and the family unit, and there is a balance to be struck. I agree with that. But it is also true, tragically, that the family unit is one of the most common places for sexual abuse to happen. And we have a responsibility to those children to ensure they are empowered to protect themselves, to spot the signs of abuse, and to go to a trusted adult and report it. And if we can't do that, we are failing those children. And I would ask members to think on that. I want to return to my own comments about a dog whistle to the far right, and I think we have heard a very strong dog whistle to the far right from Mr Buckley here today, so I stand by my remarks. I stand by my remarks because, no, it is not parents, and I want to be clear about this. I believe that the DUP has engaged in a dog whistle to the far right. There are many parents out there with legitimate concerns and questions which I believe can be assuaged and addressed, but instead the DUP choose to capitalise on that fear, to spread misinformation and contribute nothing more than fear, prejudice and hate to this debate. And I think that, Mr Speaker, is shameful.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Mr Clark.
Can I ask Mr Speaker to examine what the member's just said in terms of the reference, backing up his claims on social media and describing a member of my party as at the far right?
Look at that, yes.
Well, contrary to what Mr Tennyson says, this motion from the Alliance Party is not about education. It is about indoctrination. It is about the free course for indoctrination on the Alliance Party's pro-abortion agenda, on their transgenderism agenda. And if you want to indoctrinate, what do you need to do? You need to get rid of the obstacles. And that is why this motion is specific and determined to expunge parents' rights, to expunge governors' rights, to expunge regard to the ethos of a school. Let's remember what the statutory position is in relation to education. It is that the Board of Governors and the principal have the statutory responsibility to deliver the minimum curriculum content, but they also have autonomy over when, how and who is involved in curriculum delivery, aligned with the ethos of the school. And those are the targets of the Alliance Party today. Parents, get them out of the situation. Governors, get them out of the situation. School ethos, remove it. Why? Because they want to enforce their own agenda. And in doing that, they're quite happy to brazenly disregard the human rights of parents. Because as has been quoted here today, the human rights of parents in education are set out in the European Convention, in the relevant protocol, and they say the state shall respect the rights of parents to ensure such education and teaching as is consistent with their religious and philosophical outlook. This motion is about expunging that right. Not for the first time. Those who hold themselves out as the great liberals, in fact, turn out to be the most illiberal and the most totalitarian. And that's what we're seeing here today. So let's take some insight into this. They're going to have this standardised approach to RSE. So when they come to talk about transgenderism, which the Alliance Party likes to promote and defend, and a child asks about puberty blockers, are they to be told, yes, you can have puberty blockers, yes, you should have puberty blockers? And what are they doing? They're sowing the most immense discord between child and parent. The parent that they've shut outside the door, the child goes home, tells what's been taught. What do you think they're doing? They're bringing division, untold division, to education. That is the purpose, for the sake of promoting their narrow agenda. That is the purpose of this motion. Take abortion. Sadly now, under the regulations, abortion has to be taught as a right. As a right. So again, parents will be set up against pupils. No, I will not give way, because I have no time to hear something that's not going to inform the debate. So let's be very, very clear. This is an agenda by the Alliance Party to enforce their worldview on those who dare to disagree. And you would think, listening to some in this debate, that we've never had a safeguarding policy in schools. All the issues which have been addressed, every school has a safeguarding policy which is capable of addressing the complaints and the issues that have been raised. And yet you would think we don't even have those. So, not for the first time, the Alliance Party, the great illiberals of our society, are in the business of they know best, only they know what's right, and they will ram it down everyone's throat. And it's quite clearly what they call a progressive agenda, which they know will offend parents, which they know will offend governors, which they know will offend the ethos. So the answer is expunge all of that and railroad it through. No thanks, not in my name.
But before I call Jerry Carroll, members should not persist in asking other members to give way. So you ask them once or twice, and if they don't want to give way, you should not persist. And that has been a ruling of this House for a number of decades now. I call Jerry Carroll.
Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow social, political and religious conservatism to be a barrier to our children's education. There should be nothing controversial about providing comprehensive, age-appropriate and evidence-based education on sexual and reproductive health. It's not enough to say that changes to RSE are well overdue, although they are, but the failure to bring them forward is a risk to young people's health, safety and overall well-being. Our education system falls far short on all sorts of issues, including sexual orientation, reproductive health, consent and gender identity, and it's not good enough. It doesn't take much extrapolation, Speaker, to figure out the harm the system can cause to young people grappling with relationships, sexual or reproductive health, pregnancy, gender identity or their sexuality. Those who would deny them proper RSE are not only putting them at risk, but as our friends at the Children's Commissioner's Office remind us, they are infringing on the children's right to, and I quote, an education, to health, the right to protection from violence and abuse, to survival and development, to identity, the right to non-discrimination and equality, and the freedom of thought and belief. Many of those who oppose age-appropriate, scientifically accurate RSE claim they want to protect children with their conservative agenda. I would ask the question, how then do they justify the fact that 62% of young people resort to friends for information and 55% use social media for information on sex and relationships? As Alliance for Choice highlight the scope for misinformation as well as harmful narratives and stereotypes around misogyny, coercive control, body image and heteronormativity are profound. The implicit damage to the health and well-being of young people with this approach should be obvious to everyone. And it should also be obvious, Mr. Speaker, who is leading the charge against making the necessary changes to RSE. The politicians in particular should be familiar to us. They're the same parties and politicians and parties who have denied the rights of the LGBT plus community and resisted the democratic demand for equal marriage, denied women and pregnant people the right to choose, are currently denying trans people the right to gender reaffirming surgery, healthcare as well. It should be no surprise to anyone that the DUP want to infringe upon the rights of the marginalised and to roll back on the hard-won right to reproductive healthcare, amongst other things. And Mr. Speaker, there may be parents out there who are genuinely moved by this issue and who are acting in what they perceive to be their child's interest. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that they are being deliberately misled. There was a lot of talk about coded language. The far right are using RSE as a dog whistle. They are using it to bring together a regressive alliance of anti-choice activists, anti-LGBTQ bigots and conservative fundamentalists. And I want to say shame on the upper band member for his dog whistle approach, not just today, but in leading protests against this issue. Why don't you try leading protests against the health service being underfunded or our education system being underfunded or any other issue? There are those who yearn for a return to the conservative and reactionary climate, north and south, where the rights of the LGBT community, women and children are up for debate. We will not be dragged backwards, Mr. Speaker. We will not allow the right to use this issue to infringe on the rights of everyone and anyone. And I support today's motion. I urge the Education Minister to get on with the job of providing and funding age-appropriate, evidence-based RSE.
Just before it's raised by a member, I will be looking at Mr. Carroll's remarks as well, given that is asked to look at Mr. Tennyson's. I now call the Minister for Education, Paul Gibbon.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to respond to today's motion. Today, education faces massive challenges in Northern Ireland. The budgetary challenges are enormous. While we have secured a pay settlement for teachers, the situation with regard to support staff remains unresolved. The maintenance backlog for schools continues to grow, with many children being educated in facilities which are unfit for purpose. At the present rate, the programme for building new schools already announced will take decades to deliver. The ever-increasing challenges concerning children with special needs are well understood by members across this chamber and will be a top priority of my department in the months to come. The issue of childcare and early learning has been identified as a priority by every party in the executive. And as a result of industrial action, the proper inspection of schools has not taken place for years. We have not had system-level data on statutory assessment at Key Stage 1, 2 or 3 for almost a decade. There is a critical challenge to update and keep our curriculum under review and fit for the future. Qualifications at Key Stage 4 and at 16+ will need to be fundamentally reformed to meet the needs of our learners, and we must drive up standards right across our sector. I could go on, Mr. Speaker, but today we are faced with a motion which addresses none of these issues. Instead, it is a motion which is effectively a vote of no confidence in schools, teachers and boards of governors, and implicitly says Stormont knows better. I do not accept this analysis. Unlike those who propose this motion, I trust schools to make decisions which are appropriate for the needs of the children that they understand best. I fundamentally believe in the autonomy of schools. Standardising an approach means the imposition of one single approach on all schools. Now, RSE is obviously an area that is both sensitive and contentious. There are differing views on what the standardised approach should be. Standardisation would therefore involve the Minister imposing a contentious approach on every school and every child regardless of the professional judgments of teachers, the ethos of the school, or the views of governors, parents and children. Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Chairman of the Education Committee. He said we need a whole school approach. We need to equip children and young people with information to make the right decisions. The rights of parents are important. They have a vital role, said the Chairman of the Education Committee. They should be consulted. They should be engaged. He recognised that there are strongly held views on this issue, and yet went on to say we must get a standardised approach. The two cannot sit beside each other. I'll give way.
I understand the scale of the challenges that you've set out in the education system. I mean, anyone sitting in the Education Committee could not argue with anything you've said there in terms of those challenges. But if we are also hearing from young people that despite we've got a very professional teaching workforce, we do have engaged parent bodies, but we have a situation where young people are saying that RSE does not meet their needs, it does not relate to the lives that they lead or that the world that they live in. Would you also agree that it is your responsibility as the Education Minister to ensure that the RSE curriculum does indeed meet the needs of young people, all those other things and the context you've set aside?
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Chairman of the Committee that we ought to be engaging with children, with young people in this area. We do. I'll outline further how we do that. And can I thank the Chairman for the Committee for his respectful manner that he has engaged in the debate and the way in which he has conducted himself. A marked contrast to the member in front with his sniggering, snarling attitude throughout this entire debate towards members of this House. The standard approach, if we went down standardisation, would be, in the words of the motion, compulsory for every child. This would fail to respect diversity in the school system and in society in Northern Ireland and would be fundamentally undemocratic. The Education Curriculum Minimum Content Order 2007 sets out statutory requirements relating to the curriculum through high-level areas of learning. Specifically, it provides that the statutory curriculum is balanced and broadly based, which promotes the spiritual, emotional, moral, cultural, intellectual and physical development of pupils at the school and thereby of society, and prepare such pupils for the opportunities, responsibilities and experiences of life by equipping them with appropriate knowledge, understanding and skills. The statutory curriculum for personal development and mutual understanding at primary level and the personal development strand of learning for life and work at post-primary level prescribes the high-level minimum content for relationships and sexual education. At each key stage, this is the minimum entitlement that all young people must receive. The minimum content provides flexibility and schools have a high degree of autonomy over what is taught. Relationships and sexuality education in the Northern Ireland curriculum is not new. There were requirements for schools to deliver RSE before the introduction of the Education Order of 2007. In 2013, there was a circular which required schools to have an RSE policy. In 2011, there was the Education and Training Inspectorate. They published a report on RSE in post-primary schools. The Department of Education subsequently wrote to schools in 2014 and published a revised guidance circular in 2015 that required schools to have an RSE policy based on their ethos and subject to consultation with parents and pupils and highlighting issues around dealing with sensitive issues. However, on the 5th of June 2023, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland brought forward regulations. The 2023 regulations required pupils at key stages 3 and 4 to receive age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights, covering prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion, to reflect the legal duties placed on the Department as a result of the legislation that had been brought forward by the Secretary of State. Now, whilst the Board of Governors and the Principal in the school have a statutory responsibility to deliver minimum curriculum content, they also have autonomy over when, how and who is involved in curriculum delivery, aligned with the ethos of the school. This includes the change to the curriculum made by the Secretary of State with regards to RSE. It should be noted that the change to the curriculum made by the Secretary of State does not prevent teachers and pupils from discussing and commenting on moral, ethical or spiritual issues which may arise in relation to the matters associated with the legislative change to the minimum content that has been outlined. On the 1st of September 2023, the Department launched a consultation on proposals for regulations that would prescribe the circumstances in which, at the request of a parent, a pupil may be excused from lessons pertaining to this change to the statutory curriculum. Mr. Speaker, there was an enormous total of 13,461 responses that were received by the close of this consultation. The consultation responses also indicated the overwhelming opposition to the Secretary of State's regulation, and at a time when Westminster was not prepared to intervene to support key priorities such as health and education, they saw fit to interfere in what were clearly issues which were devolved to the Northern Ireland Assembly. I'm going to make some progress, please. Such piecemeal and selective interventions risked calling into question the very nature of the devolved settlement. There have been many calls for RSE to be standardised and made mandatory in the curriculum. That call has been repeated again today. However, RSE is already a mandatory part of the curriculum in schools. The minimum legal content has to be taught and is set out as high-level areas of learning. But fundamental to our approach to education in Northern Ireland across every area, it is a matter for teachers to decide how the curriculum should be delivered, which resources to use and which specific topics should be covered. The flexibility of our curriculum is a key strength. Boards of Governors are ultimately responsible for the curriculum that their school delivers and to ensure it meets the minimum requirements. It is their responsibility to ensure that a comprehensive programme is delivered which meets the needs of its pupils and aligns with its RSE policy and school ethos. The Department requires schools to consult with parents and young people on the development and review of their RSE policy, and has re-emphasised this in guidance that was issued at the start of this year. This is the right approach. It is essential that parents are consulted about what their children are taught and not condescended to by members here who think that they know better. I would not presume to tell parents what to think or to second-guess the choices that they would make for their children. The proposers of this motion arrogantly assume that it should be politicians, not parents, who make decisions for their children. Schools are very well placed to lead the way in attitudinal and behavioural change, with a whole school environment which equips and supports the empowerment of future generations to develop healthy, respectful relationships. Addressing the root causes of violence against women and girls, including coercive control, will be a central part of achieving this outcome. On the issue, Mr. Speaker, of addressing violence against women and girls, coercive control, I make this point. The Assembly passed legislation criminalising the purchase of sexual services. School children that I went into, the girls said to me, we should not be viewed as a commodity and a product that can be bought by men. What party in this Assembly voted against it? The Alliance Party. So when they had an opportunity to stand with women and girls, they didn't take it. They stood instead with pimps. They stood instead with those who human traffic people into this country. That's the Alliance Party record of ending violence against women and girls. The policy landscape has changed significantly around RSE and will continue to do so as we consider the recommendations arising from the various reports and evaluations and the Secretary of State's legislative change. As I noted earlier, this is fuelling discussion around what should be included in the curriculum and whether there should be greater prescription and standardisation, which is what this motion calls for. However, this would be contrary to the legislation upon which the curriculum is built, namely that it is flexible and teacher-led to best meet the needs of pupils. This does not just apply to the teaching of RSE, it applies to all areas of learning. It is important that flexibility is not lost by a prescriptive approach, which in itself may not actually guarantee high-quality teaching and learning. This is the approach in England, which has brought schools into conflict with some parents. Scotland takes a largely non-prescriptive approach through guidance which has caused similar issues with parents, so we have, in this country, steered a middle path with limited prescription, which I believe is the correct approach. I'm not going to give way. The challenge, therefore, remains to provide a curriculum which continues to engage with young people and reflects their views, and as I have said, open engagement with parents and pupils is key to that. And I hope members will reflect on the approach that my department takes, which is focused on letting teachers teach rather than directing them centrally. This approach reflects the design principles which underpin our curriculum, which provide schools with autonomy and flexibility to meet the needs of their pupils. The motion calls for evidence-based RSE, and let us hope that evidence isn't just a VHS recording. I encourage members to get into schools so they actually can see what's happening. But in practice, when such changes to the RSE curriculum took place in England in September 2020, that led to activist groups advising schools and providing them with highly questionable teaching materials. Indeed, many schools adopted radical approaches. In England, under the guise of inclusive and evidence-based RSE, primary school children have been taught that they all have a gender that depends not on the reality of their bodies, but on how their interests match up with stereotypical ideas of boys and girls. It's no stretch of the imagination to think that some of the thousands of children referred to England's scandal-hit and now closed Gender Identity Development Service might not have been referred had they not received these lessons. The Independent Review of Gender Identity Services for Children and Young People, the CAS Review's final report, was published on the 10th of April this year. Dr. Hilary Cass's review this month found remarkably weak evidence on treatments such as puberty blockers. Its recommendations were welcomed by both the Conservative and Labour parties. Mr. Speaker, if this motion has been of any value, it is that it allows me the opportunity to announce that I have asked my department to review the CAS review for any learning that may be appropriate for Northern Ireland. Mr. Speaker, I oppose the motion.
I call Sinead McLaughlin to wind on the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss RSE today. Kate Nicholl very succinctly and passionately set out the motion, and my colleague Cara Hunter expanded on the need for consent education and clearly described the complexity around coercive control. As many have said, education is absolutely foundational to our society. That much would go without saying. And one of the most important forms of education that we can give our children is about relationships that they will form throughout their lives. But right now we aren't doing right by our young people in any shape, form or fashion. In fact, we're letting them down very badly. In countless examples, the teachers who deliver RSE in our schools are dedicated professionals. But in truth, it is the system that is completely failing to give those teachers the support they need to deliver this education properly. That is not acceptable, and neither is the position that our young people are left in as a consequence. And as we speak, we have young people leaving school with actually no idea, in many cases, about what a healthy relationship looks like. And we have many schools where the Church's teachings are more influential than the quality in the curriculum. We have pupils who are never taught about consent, abuse or boundaries whatsoever. That's not good for them, and it's also not good for our society. And like every part of our children's education, relationship and sexuality education must work for every child. That's why it needs to be accessible and inclusive for every pupil and in every classroom. That includes LGBT+ pupils, many of whom have been failed for years by current provision. Owen Tennyson very bravely shared his personal experience today, and thank you for that. In that context, it would be remiss not to talk about those failures. In the Ireland I grew up in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, we were given no sexual education worth talking about. In fact, worse than that, we got a twisted version of sex education. Basically, we were told sex was bad, and even thoughts about sex were sinful. Our children and our parents were dictated to by both the church and the state. To this day, we see the damage that has been done to our society. The cruel abuse that many suffered and endured at the hands of religious orders and schools is now well known and accepted. This government, this executive, is trying to deal with the aftermath of the historic and religious institutional abuse, including shocking levels of paedophilia and child rape, as well as sexual violence in the mother and baby's homes. This remains Ireland's shame, north and south. It is up to the politicians of today to right this wrong. And that starts from learning from our past and giving all our young people an educational journey that meets their needs and teaches them how to navigate healthy relationships. As Colin McGrath has already highlighted, improving RSE is a safeguarding priority. Because if the current model continues, young people will still leave school without an understanding of issues such as consent, or the ability to recognise abuse against themselves or someone else when that happens. Connie Egan and Emma Sheeran led the way in talking about ending violence against women and girls. This leads in many instances to the kind of unhealthy attitudes that fuel abuse, particularly against those women and girls. These attitudes are part of a pyramid of violence which can only be dismantled by early education in our schools. That is rightly a key focus of the Ending Violence Against Girls strategic framework. Addressing these attitudes and ending violence and abuse later on in life is core to a society where gender equality is the reality. And this all starts in schools. Speaker, there has been a lot of scaremongering in recent months, and indeed during this debate here. That is unacceptable. We have a duty to our children, not to stoke fear or spread misinformation, but to work with schools and pupils to ensure that we see reform. The curriculum should be about providing age-appropriate, scientifically accurate and comprehensive facts, not about enforcing a moral compass as we've seen in the past. In some schools, pupils are actually taught in a context that contributes to stigma.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I call Lily McAllister to wind on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I sum up the debate, I just want to make some important points. And I am proud to have put my name to such an important motion today, which is seeking to fundamentally give our children tools that they need to protect themselves from abuse and coercion, and to help young people know what a healthy relationship looks like. And to portray this motion as anything other than that, and what it's spelling out to do, is simply pandering to talking points and social media-driven fear-mongering. I'm not surprised, but I am disappointed at how opponents of this debate, both here in the Assembly chamber and outside, have used misinformation and scare tactics to avoid educating children. And what I will say as well, Mr. Speaker, is also using potentially defamatory language. However, just because detractors may not wish it to be the case, the reality is that far too many children and young people experience domestic and sexual abuse. PSNI stats show that recorded sexual offences against under 18s have doubled between 2012, 2013 to 2020, 2023, with 55% of all sexual crimes reported in 2022 to 23 being against children under 18. That equates to 2,324 reported cases of sexual abuse against children. And according to the NSPCC, more than 15% of children aged 11 to 18 have been asked to provide self-generated sexual images. 25% of girls and 18% of boys aged 13 to 17 have experienced a form of physical violence from an intimate partner. And frankly, these figures are terrifying. We cannot afford to do nothing or just the bare minimum. What's more, our children, as previously pointed by previous speakers, have said that they want and need this curriculum to equip themselves as they grow up in the wide world. The appetite for standardised, age-appropriate, inclusive RSE is high among our children and young people, and we must deliver for them. As previous speakers have said, this is not about usurping the rights of parents. And I will say, as a parent, I'm a mother of 2 young boys, aged 5 and 7. We've already begun to teach at home about the issue of consent and bodily autonomy. And I want to say special thanks today to the NSPCC for their campaign on Talk Pants, which is a fantastic example of how RSE can be taught in an age-appropriate way. And I am concerned at the comments that were made by some speakers, Tom Elliott in particular, around their negativity and criticism of that pants campaign. And I would urge you and urge the member through the speaker to actually engage with NSPCC on such. Yep.
Just to clarify, I didn't speak negatively of that campaign. I said about some issues around that NSPCC and others have brought forward.
Okay.
Order. As a business in the order paper is not expected to be disposed of by 6 p.m, in accordance with the Standing Order 10.3, I will allow business to continue until 7 p.m. or until the business is completed. Please resume, Ms McAllister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I thank the member for clarifying, and I'm happy to move on to some of his other points. But before I do so, there are a number of organisations that I want to thank for engaging with representatives right across that chamber, including the Northern Ireland Children and Young People's Commissioner, the NSPCC, Bernardo's, the Children's Law Centre, Include Youth, Alliance for Choice, and Marie Curie. And that is not an exhaustive list, but there are too many to name every single one of them. I want to turn then to the points that were made in the debate, and I'll start with Cara Hunter. And I want to thank the member for bringing forward the amendment, of which we will be supporting today. The member spoke about the issue of consent, and when young people have said that they do not know, or they did not know that they could oppose, withhold consent, ultimately say no. And I think that is absolutely shocking. Pat Sheehan also highlighted the issue of consistency, and I do agree that consistency is key. We cannot have the difference from school to school in what our young people are being taught. And I move to David Brooks, who said that it is best placed for parents, that we need to look at school ethos, that we need to get real, that we have to be careful of not being dangerous and immoral, that we need to secure that the family unit is the best place when we have the trust of parents in educating our young people. I will turn to a number of the points in which he said that we cannot get involved in parental and should not trump the rights of parents. He said and mentioned about education, nutrition, shelter, that we trust parents to do all that they can. That's not an absolute trust, and that's why we have a Department of Children's Social Services, because there are instances in when the state must and should get involved. We do not agree with opt-out, because we believe that the child's rights, along with international experts right across the globe, should be upheld when it comes to RSE. But I will not be surprised at the DUP and the fact that they don't like the human rights approach. We do not want to impose our ethics. But I want to turn to some of the points made by not only David Brooks, by Diane Dodds and Jonathan Buckley, in which they said, the school ethos, let's be frank about this, you mean religion. And let's talk for a moment for those of us who aren't religious, who do not believe in God, who do not believe that the fact that ethos should trump all the rights of everybody. We understand that there is a Christian-based, do you know what, there is a Christian-based ethos in our education system, and some of us do not have a choice in that matter. But when you are consulting with parents and saying, as a school, as a Board of Governors, that you should teach RSE and the family unit and children through marriage as the utmost of importance, how do you think that feels for the parents of people who aren't, for the kids of parents who aren't married? For the kids who have 2 mothers or 2 fathers, when it explicitly states in that consultation report that they're going to teach about the priority of family units through marriage and children. Let's get real when we talk about school ethos. We need to protect children so that they feel that they are valued in their classroom, that their existence and identity is just as important as everyone else's. I also want to speak a little bit about Tom Elliott and the points that he made around age-appropriate education and the fact that what may be right for one child at one age is not right for another, and I will focus it on the element of Zen. All children deserve RSE, especially children who have special needs, because it is those children who are most vulnerable. And there are some organisations who do fantastic work around this already, including Informing Choices, who teach to the most vulnerable children in SEN settings about what is appropriate when it comes to RSE. It's a very, very difficult job to do, but it's so important to do that. Nick also focused around children being heard, needed to listen to them, and also highlighted the fear from teachers that they are not equipped at times and feel that their teachings are already out of date. I think it's really important that we bring this debate back to the consultation responses, and I do agree that we need to listen to the consultation responses. And the Minister focused a lot on that in his response, but I just want to ask the Minister if he is aware of how many of those consultation responses were actually children. Because according to the Foyle Network Foundation, 0.86% of respondents were children. How do you engage with children if you expect them to fill a form in line or write a letter? You do it through organisations that are already doing it, through the Northern Ireland Youth Forum, the Belfast City Youth Forum. You do it with the Children's Law Centre and their youth stakeholders. You don't do it by a convoluted method where you put their parents' choices above theirs. Because I understand, as a parent, I understand how frustrating it is when people tell me how to educate my children, but I also understand that as a parent, I do not know everything. And that's what's key here. Every single member who brought up this debate respected the rights of parents, but balanced it on the rights of children. And I want to go back to that for just a moment. No, thank you. I want to go back to that for a moment. I want to tell the story, a really difficult story, of a young girl who wasn't equipped, who didn't have the appropriate RSE in Northern Ireland, was taught through Northern Ireland, who told her teacher that one of her family members was playing with her muffin because she didn't know the correct terms for her body parts. That teacher didn't know what she was talking about, so couldn't even get her help until months later. I mean, that is horrific, the situation that we are finding ourselves in. And I think what we're asking here today, that we can find common ground. We can. Because we can listen to parents and we can inform parents that we are not wishing to trump what your beliefs are. We are wishing to safeguard every single child in Northern Ireland, because every single child and their future matters. Thank you.
You've outlined that you're going to review some of the comments made during this debate. Will you rule on whether or not it was appropriate, following Mr Tennyson's very brave sharing of his own lived experience in which he told us that he felt indoctrinated at school, whether it was appropriate for the Minister to comment that it clearly didn't work?
We will be reviewing the debate in any event, and we're quite happy to review any comments which are inappropriate, and come back to members on that, because I think there has been some inappropriate comments. But nonetheless, we will do that over the course of time and with cool heads. Now, the question is that the amendment standing in the name of Cara Hunter and Colin McGrath be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, if any, no. Ayes. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, if any, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We then move to the motion as amended in the name of Kate Nicholl. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, if any, no. No. Clear the lobbies. The question will be put in 3 minutes. Order, order. Members will resume their seats. The question is that the motion as amended be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, if any, no. No. Do we have tellers? Tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes are Peter McReynolds and Nick Matheson. Tellers for the noes are Trevor Clark and Gary Middleton. Clear the lobbies. Assembly divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Secure the doors. Order, members, will resume their seats. Clerk, read the result.
82 members voted, 49 members voted aye, 33 members voted no. The motion is carried.
The motion is carried. Unfasten the doors. Move to the next item of business. The business is that the Assembly to adjourn. The Assembly is adjourned.